unfinished history remains. And for some reason, once you allow huge criminals of this kind to go free, you start on a different moral compass. You start by beginning to think that crime doesn't always have to be punished, that there are circumstances in which crime can be swept under. Then the next thing that happened, of course, and all of you are aware of that, is the arms deal in our country. Again, nobody has properly been prosecuted. There has not been proper investigation. It is quite clear that crime was committed. It is quite clear, too, that the arms deal was actually a continuation of what happened during apartheid. Had it not been for the sanctions-busting operations, the arms deal could not have taken place as easily. Had those people been prosecuted then, the arms deal could not have taken place that easily. So the arms deal, in an odd way, was a continuation of sanctions busting, except that now people involved in our democratic government were making the money and doing things wrongly. It wasn't the white apartheid people who were doing these things. And finally, as a result of the arms deal, came state capture of the kind that we know it. And again, there is a continuity. If you understand the facts carefully, the sanctions busting leads to arms deal leads to state capture, and therefore there's a great deal of unwinding to be done before we work out the direction in which we're going to go and what we're going to do. So let us not blame Zuma only. Let us have an interesting understanding of where we are going and understand this at its roots. So I want to say firstly that in order to get the society right, it is absolutely urgent for all international sanctions-busting crimes to be prosecuted either in South Africa or in international crimes tribunals, so that we begin to make a clean start. Because you can't clean things at the top alone. You've got to clean things right from where things started. So a prerequisite would be the prosecution of these people. A prerequisite, secondly, is to go into the arms deal carefully, see what crimes were committed, and ensure that these crimes are appropriately prosecuted. And then, of course, state capture too, one needs to go into it very, very carefully and make sure that prosecutions happen. Because unless prosecutions happen, unless people are punished for what they've done, our society is, this is not the kind of crime where any kind of truth and reconciliation can work. And then I must say a word about commissions and warn that commissions can be quite satisfying. Commissions, if enough of them are appointed, can blunt the edge. And very, very often, and I'm not saying that it is the case with the commissions that we have now, I'm just warning that very often that happens with the arms deal commissions. What happens is that commissions take a long time, they make recommendations, and as evidence is revealed before the commission, people begin to feel satisfied that things are being done. It is a false sense of satisfaction to think that once there are commission recommendations and commission findings placing blame where that blame belongs, the problem is actually over. In my view, it is absolutely dangerous to have a situation in which you stop at commissions and leave it right there. Because then the commissions become a way in which you ultimately don't prosecute people. So what I must say very, very strongly is that if all these commissions are not followed by criminal prosecution for the crime that people did, then I'm afraid we're not going to get anywhere. So we need to ensure a good policing system. We need to ensure a good prosecution system. We need to get international help if possible, but we need to help our government along to get this right. If we don't reform the police system, don't reform the prosecution system, we're not going to get very, very far. As I understand it, there's a consultation process now for the appointment of the National Prosecuting Authority person. But you see, there are other more difficult problems. And I want to address the argument that Zuma was the only one at fault. The thinking is that Zuma appointed the National Director of Public Prosecutions badly. The thinking is that Zuma appointed the police bosses at various levels. The thinking is that because Zuma made all these appointments, and somebody has said that the president is being given too much power, and that is why these things happen. But what we need to realize is that Zuma, in terms of the Constitution, the president of the country has no power to make these appointments on his own. The National Director of Public Prosecutions, judges in our country, the appointments of commissions as well, they are all functions in terms of Section 85 of the Constitution. And all these functions are performed by the President in consultation with the Cabinet. So it is the President, the Deputy President, and each and every member of the Cabinet which is responsible for each of these decisions, and they must actually take responsibility. Now, one of two things: either members of Cabinet and the Deputy President at the different times did not read the Constitution at all and didn't understand what their responsibilities were, in which case they are criminally responsible. Alternatively, and this might, I don't know which is worse, alternatively, they knew what their responsibilities were. These decisions were all taken at Cabinet meetings where each and every minister would be responsible. But now it is convenient to put the blame on somebody else. So when you talk about the appointment of police seats, when you talk about the appointment of the National, the Prosecuting Authority, when you talk about any disciplinary proceedings, all these matters that in relation with, to which decisions have been taken, Cabinet takes the decision. So I think it is very important for the future for ministers to understand their responsibilities in accordance with the Constitution. They must understand their responsibilities sufficiently and take collective responsibility for what happens. Part of the problem is, maybe that our ministers need to be educated on what their constitutional responsibilities are. I just wonder how many cabinet ministers have studied sections 84 and 85 of the Constitution. How many people realize that the whole of the cabinet is responsible? And I think that that is one thing that people must begin to understand very, very clearly. Otherwise, we are not going to get anywhere at all. Having said that, we need to ensure the appointment of proper public prosecutors, proper policemen. All must be done through a proper process. And I think what has been started now, a consultation process for the appointment of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, might be a very good thing. But it may also be a very good idea, because part of the problem is that in our system of government, the separation of powers between the executive on the one hand and the legislature on the other hand is not worth really much. It's not worth much because of the party system, because of the absence of constituency representation, And because, let's say the ANC has 62% of the vote in the country, they appoint the cabinet, which comes from the ANC. The ANC determines policy. The ANC is in complete control. And the idea, ordinarily, that members of the African National Congress, who are members of parliament, are going to bring their own leaders, the senior members of their own political parties who are cabinet ministers, or the boss of the political party who is the president of the country, if they are going to, the notion that the members of the ANC are going to call their own people very seriously to account is a very, very difficult notion indeed. And we understand what happened in Nkandla. It was quite obvious that those things, the upgrading work done there had nothing to do with security. And yet, in my view, people just lied to protect each other. Every member of the cabinet during Nkandla time would have known, or ought to have known, that these security upgrades are not good. They are not acceptable under any circumstances. And yet, nobody, but nobody from the ruling political party, not a single cabinet minister, ever said a single thing. So again, cabinet must learn to take its full responsibilities. We must learn to understand our constitution and work that through quite carefully. Then there's another problem. The other problem is about the duties of members of parliament. We all know that members of parliament get sworn in and they undertake to uphold the constitution and the law, to protect it and to uphold it. The president does, each cabinet member does, each member of parliament does. And the interesting question which we've got to work out is, what do members of parliament do if what they are asked to do by the African National Congress as Congress members, and that applies to each and every political party, do they vote in accordance with their own consciences, in terms of the Constitution, in terms